No one expected the invisible woman to become the most powerful person in the room. The office buzzed with the usual morning energy, but no one paid attention as Evelyn slipped in through the side door, pushing her cleaning cart at her steady, unhurried pace. Dressed in her dark green uniform like a suit of armor, she maintained a calm and neutral expression, revealing nothing to the executives who barely noticed her presence. To them, she was just the cleaning lady, the one who wiped their desks, emptied their trash cans, and exchanged the occasional polite nod with the few who acknowledged her at all. This had been her reality for years at Hawthorne & Beck, a flourishing corporation in the heart of Dallas, Texas. Now, in her mid-50s, Evelyn had grown accustomed to the routine, the indifferent glances, the offhanded jokes whispered when they assumed she wasn't listening, the way her presence was often regarded as an inconvenience. Just last week, she had waited silently outside the conference room, ready to clean once a meeting ended, only to hear someone mutter, "She's not even doing anything right now." But Evelyn never reacted. She never did. She kept her head down, working steadily, refusing to give them the satisfaction of a response. What they didn't know, what no one in that office knew, was that Evelyn had a secret powerful enough to upend everything. But she was patient. She watched, she listened, and she waited. Today, however, as she walked through the bright hallways, maintaining her usual composed exterior, she knew she was reaching her breaking point. The morning unfolded as it always did. Evelyn polished the glass doors until they gleamed, vacuumed the plush lobby carpet, and tidied up the desks of those who never hesitated to leave piles of paperwork behind. She worked diligently as conversations about major deals and promotions drifted through the air. Then, one discussion caught her attention. She wasn't trying to eavesdrop. It wasn't her nature. But the voices were loud, impossible to ignore. "The shareholders' meeting is next week," an executive said smugly, his tone bordering on arrogant. "And we've got nothing to worry about. The board loves the numbers, and the CEO is untouchable. No one in their right mind would challenge him." Evelyn's grip on her cart tightened for just a moment. They had no idea how wrong they were, but she didn't dwell on it. There was still work to do, and she needed to be prepared for what was coming. Hawthorne & Beck prided itself on its sleek, modern image. Its towering glass headquarters, a symbol of corporate success, was often featured in business magazines. Inside, however, the reality was far less glamorous. The culture was cutthroat, and the higher you climbed, the less you cared about those below you. For nearly a decade, Evelyn had quietly observed everything. She saw promotions handed to the loudest voices rather than the most qualified employees. She witnessed secretive deals made behind closed doors and watched as blame was unfairly placed on those too powerless to defend themselves. And then there was the CEO, Alan Greaves, a man who wielded authority and arrogance in equal measure. Alan ruled through fear. His booming voice silenced even the boldest executives, and to him, success was all that mattered. People were merely tools to be used. Evelyn often overheard his cutting remarks about employees who no longer fit the company's image. Once, she had heard him sneer about an older secretary. "She's still here? Why haven't we retired her yet? It's not like she adds any value." But it wasn't just his words. The entire company was steeped in unethical practices, hidden just beneath the surface. Bonuses for lower-level staff were slashed, while executives celebrated record-breaking profits. Expense reports were padded, client dealings were shady, and those who dared to speak out were swiftly and quietly fired. Evelyn and the rest of the cleaning staff bore the brunt of this toxic environment. She had seen co-workers brought to tears after being scolded over a single speck of dust. Their paychecks remained stagnant, even as their workload grew. Worst of all was the constant disregard for their humanity. The way employees avoided eye contact, spoke down to them, or treated them as if they were invisible. One moment in particular still burned in Evelyn's memory. A young intern had accidentally spilled coffee on the marble floor near Alan's office. The intern froze, fear flashing across his face as Alan rounded the corner. "Are you kidding me?" Alan snapped, his sharp gaze immediately landing on Evelyn, who had just passed by with her mop and bucket. "Clean this up," he barked at her, as if the mess had been her fault. Evelyn said nothing. She didn't need to. The intern stammered out an apology, but Alan dismissed him with a wave of his hand. To him, people like Evelyn and the intern were nothing more than background noise. Moments like these had accumulated over the years, each one adding weight to an ever-growing burden. Evelyn's patience was remarkable, but she wasn't immune to the exhaustion of being invisible, to the sting of constant disrespect. Still, she wasn't the type to break under pressure. Instead, she let these experiences fuel her resolve, storing them away like ammunition for the moment she would need them most. Those around her might not have noticed her silence, but it spoke volumes. Evelyn was always watching, always listening, and the more she observed, the clearer it became. This company's success was built at the cost of its humanity. But Evelyn wasn't just a passive observer. She had been quietly planning, and soon everything would begin to fall into place. For years, she had kept her secret not out of fear, but out of strategy. She wasn't just a cleaning lady. She was the largest shareholder in Hawthorne and Beck, a title she had inherited after the unexpected passing of her late husband, Martin. Martin had been a quiet investor in the company's early days, buying shares when few believed in its future. By the time he passed, those shares had grown into a controlling stake. At first, Evelyn hadn't known what to do with the power she now held. She wasn't a corporate strategist or a seasoned boardroom player. She was just Evelyn, a woman who had raised 2 children, fought through life's hardships, and found comfort in routine. But as time passed, and as she continued her quiet work in the company, she began to understand the value of her position. Her invisibility was an advantage. It allowed her to observe without being noticed, to listen without raising suspicion, and to gather everything she needed to know about the people who believed they ran the company. The moment that finally pushed her over the edge happened one evening during a routine cleaning shift. Evelyn had just finished wiping down the executive lounge when she overheard 2 senior managers laughing over drinks. They were discussing upcoming layoffs, treating the decision like a joke. Some of these people act like their jobs actually matter. One of them chuckled. They don't realize how replaceable they are. Evelyn stood frozen behind the door, her fingers tightening around the cleaning cloth. To these men, the employees they were about to discard were nothing more than numbers on a spreadsheet. But Evelyn knew better. These were real people, with families, responsibilities, and dreams. And yet, to the executives, they were disposable. That night, Evelyn sat at her small kitchen table, a cup of tea beside her, and started writing. She didn't know exactly where it would lead, but she knew one thing. She couldn't stay silent any longer. She listed every unethical practice she had witnessed, every employee who had been mistreated, and every moment that had stayed with her over the years. By the time the sun rose, she had outlined a plan that would change everything. Her first step was to dig deeper. Using her unrestricted access to the building, Evelyn began gathering information that most people wouldn't give a second thought. She made mental notes of conversations, paid attention to schedules, and discreetly glanced at documents left on desks. She wasn't stealing or spying. She was simply putting together a complete picture of how the company really operated. The second step was to call in reinforcements. Evelyn reached out to a handful of trusted allies outside the company, friends who were lawyers, financial analysts, and former employees who had left on bad terms. She shared what she knew and sought their advice. Slowly, they helped her craft a strategy that would not only expose the company's toxic culture, but also ensure its future was secured. The final step was the hardest. Facing Alan and the board would take more than just evidence. It would take courage, composure, and an unshakable belief in her own worth. She practiced her speech in front of the mirror, her voice calm but firm. This wasn't just about her. It was about everyone who had ever been dismissed, underestimated, or treated as less than. The shareholders' meeting was less than a week away, and Evelyn was ready. She wasn't just walking into that room as a cleaning lady. She was walking in as the one person who held the fate of the company in her hands. Yet, as the day drew closer, she couldn't ignore the weight of what she was about to do. This wasn't just a confrontation. It was a reckoning. The morning of the shareholders' meeting arrived, and the building buzzed with an air of confidence. Executives strode through the hallways, unaware that today everything was about to change. Their conversations buzzed with excitement, filled with optimism about yet another year of record-breaking profits. None of them noticed Evelyn as she steadily pushed her cleaning cart toward the top-floor conference room, her expression as composed and unreadable as ever. The boardroom was a stark contrast to the rest of the office. Its long, polished table gleamed under soft lighting, while floor-to-ceiling windows framed a breathtaking view of the Dallas skyline. Seated around the table were the company's most powerful figures, with Alan Greaves positioned at the head, his posture exuding authority, his smirk dripping with arrogance. Evelyn entered quietly, just as she always did, placing a pitcher of water on the side table. No one spared her a glance. To them, she was just part of the background. But this time, Evelyn didn't leave. "Excuse me," she said, her voice slicing through the air like a blade. Heads turned, brows furrowed in confusion and mild irritation. Alan barely acknowledged her, his tone dismissive. "We're in the middle of something," he said. "I know," Evelyn replied, her voice steady. "That's why I'm here." Alan leaned back in his chair, an amused, condescending smile spreading across his face. "Unless you're here to clean up after us, I suggest you leave." Evelyn didn't flinch. Instead, she stepped forward, pulled a folder from her cart, and placed it firmly on the table. The Hawthorne and Beck logo was emblazoned across the front, alongside the words, "Shareholders Report." Silence fell over the room. Alan's smirk wavered as Evelyn began to speak. "For years, I've watched this company thrive on the backs of people you refuse to acknowledge," she said, her voice unwavering. "I've seen employees mistreated, ethical lines crossed, and profits prioritized over basic human decency. And I have stayed silent, until now." A murmur rippled through the boardroom. One of the directors leaned forward, narrowing his eyes at the folder. "What is this?" Evelyn flipped it open. "This," she said, "is proof. Proof of unethical practices, financial mismanagement, and the blatant disregard for the people who keep this company running." Alan's voice thundered through the room. "Who do you think you are, walking in here and making accusations? You're a cleaning lady." Evelyn met his glare with a quiet confidence that unsettled the room. "No, Mr. Greaves," she said calmly. "I'm the majority shareholder of Hawthorne and Beck, and today I'm firing you." The shock struck the room like a thunderclap. Alan's face drained of color, his once confident demeanor cracking as the weight of her words sank in. "You're joking," he muttered, his voice laced with disbelief. Evelyn didn't blink. "No, Mr. Greaves, I'm not." She turned to the board, her gaze sharp. "I've spent years collecting evidence, and it's all here. Fraudulent expense reports, unethical layoffs, harassment complaints that were buried. I have the power to vote him out, and I intend to use it." The room erupted in chaos. Alan's voice rose in desperation as he tried to defend himself, but the board members, sensing the gravity of the situation, quickly turned their attention to Evelyn's report. One by one, they skimmed through the documents, their expressions shifting as they pieced together the truth. It didn't take long for the vote to take place. Evelyn had done her homework, and the damning evidence left no room for doubt. Alan Greaves was stripped of his position that very afternoon. His protests were ignored as security escorted him out of the building. Evelyn stood firm, her posture straight, her expression unreadable. The same executives who had once overlooked her now stared at her with a mix of awe and guilt. But Evelyn wasn't looking for their approval. Her focus was already set on what came next. Word of Alan Greaves's dismissal spread like wildfire. By the following morning, the entire office was abuzz with whispers of disbelief. How could Evelyn, the quiet, unassuming cleaning lady, have been the company's majority shareholder all along? This time, however, the whispers weren't laced with dismissal. They carried something new: respect, admiration, and even a hint of guilt. Evelyn, however, didn't revel in the attention. The next day she returned, not with a mop and bucket, but with a clipboard and a plan. She hadn't come this far just to remove a toxic CEO. She was here to change the company's future. Over the following weeks, Evelyn worked tirelessly to implement much-needed reforms. Her first priority was to uplift the people who had been overlooked for years. Cleaning staff and other underappreciated workers received long-overdue raises. The HR department was restructured to ensure harassment and discrimination complaints were taken seriously, with a third-party watchdog introduced to guarantee transparency. She also set out to dismantle the toxic culture that had festered under Alan's leadership. The board, once complicit in his actions, now found themselves held accountable. Evelyn insisted on regular ethics training, inclusion initiatives, and employee well-being programs. Change had begun, and Evelyn made sure it would last. For the first time in years, the employees of Hawthorne and Beck felt recognized, valued, and heard. But Evelyn didn't stop there. She organized town hall meetings, inviting staff from every level to share their experiences and ideas. She listened intently, taking notes, ensuring that everyone had a say in shaping the company's future. One afternoon, as Evelyn walked through the office, she was approached by a young intern, the same one who had spilled coffee outside Alan's office months ago. "Thank you," he said sincerely, "for everything. You've changed this place." Evelyn smiled warmly. "No," she replied. "We changed this place together." Outside, the Dallas skyline shimmered in the golden light of late afternoon. Evelyn paused, gazing up at the towering glass building she had once entered unnoticed. It had been a long journey, but she had accomplished what many thought was impossible. This had never been just about firing a CEO or exposing corruption. It was about proving that no matter how invisible someone might feel, they still have the power to create meaningful change. Evelyn had shown that resilience, patience, and integrity could triumph over arrogance and greed. Taking a deep breath, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. And then she walked away. not to disappear into the background, but to step forward into a new chapter of her life. Life often underestimates the quiet strength of those who observe, endure, and act when the moment is right. Evelyn's story is a reminder that the most unexpected people can become the catalysts for profound change. If her journey inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that showcase the power of resilience and justice.